Hello, everybody. This is your producer, Jay, and we'll get started in about 3 minutes, exactly at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for your patience. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for More Than the Paralympics, the intersection between disability and sport. I'm Jay Silver, your technical producer for today's session. And before we get started, there are a few things I want to go over with you. I'm sure you've heard me say this before, but there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and you can use that to ask questions of the presenters at any time during the program. You don't have to wait for a Q&A session. And also there's a chat button at the bottom of the screen. And you can use that to send messages to presenters and to all attendees. And you do that through a drop down in the to field of the chat panel. When you select the drop down, you'll see a choice that says all panelists, that's for the presenters, and another choice that says all panelists and attendees, and that's for everyone in the meeting if you want to send a message to them. Now, presenters will respond to questions in the Q&A box. So be sure to put your questions there, not in chat. And if you need assistance at any time, please use the Q&A box as well. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to today's presenters to get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Will and Jacob, you can start your cameras and start your microphones and share your screens whenever you'd like.
Second. Yeah, good afternoon, TASH conference attendees and staff and colleagues. I really appreciate you all for coming here to attend our presentation on more than just the Paralympics, the intersectionality between disability sport, between myself, Will Freed, and one of my closest colleagues and disability advocates, Jake Goodman. Thanks
everybody for joining.
In this presentation, Jake Goodman and I are going to just do a brief introduction in a little bit. And then we're going to talk about how our experiences have been with being involved in sports. We're going to be talking about some people with disabilities who've been involved in various leadership roles in sports. And we're going to have some discussion session towards the end here to sort of get some feedback with you guys on some disability and sports issues. And feel free to interact using the chat and put some good questions in the Q&A. And we're very excited for you all to decide to attend this presentation. And I'm going to start just giving a brief overview of myself. So my name is Will Freed, and I'm currently a graduate assistant in accessibility services at Fort Hays State University in Hays, Kansas.
And my name's Jake Goodman. I am currently in my senior year of undergraduate studies at Towson University in Towson, Maryland, north of Baltimore. I'm double majoring in political science and geography and double minoring in meteorology and disability studies. Both of us are, a little bit of background about both of us are from Montgomery County, Maryland, outside of DC. We're also both former TASH interns. Will's a former communications intern. I'm a former public policy intern for TASH. We're both on the spectrum, and we both have played numerous sports, and we also have some coaching experience with, with the sports that we have spent the most time playing in.
Yeah, so I'm going to start just talking about my roles in sports. So I've been lucky to spend some time coaching and officiating. So I've coached basketball at the youth and recreational levels for 4 years. And I've really enjoyed getting my time to coach because I've learned a lot about leadership and leading others and directing other people, which applies to the real world when you're coaching sports. I've also been spending some time officiating sports. I spent the last 4 years when I was an undergraduate student at Salisbury University working in the intramural department as a sports official in the sports of volleyball, basketball, floor hockey, and flag football. And now as I moved to Kansas, I decided to still continuing officiating where I'm in my 5th year of officiating basketball. And now in Kansas, I'm a state certified official in basketball where I officiate community recreation games, junior varsity boys and girls basketball games and middle school boys and girls basketball games. And just this fall, I completed my first year of officiating middle school volleyball in Kansas. And so how I all sort of started my journey with being involved in sports was in the summer of 2016. And I picked a place called Coach Wooten's Basketball Camp, which is an overnight basketball camp at Frostburg State University up in the mountains. And they have sessions for boys and girls in basketball camp. And I was a camper there for the previous 4 summers before I decided to go work as a coach slash counselor at this camp because I enjoyed being around basketball so much. And I was sort of like upset in my life when I wasn't being involved in basketball because it gave me a lot of joy and gave me a lot of time to think and make right choices and to move on to the next play if something is wrong. And after I worked at Coach Wooten's basketball camp in 2016, I didn't have as much time in my life to go back and work that summer in the summers of 2018 and 2019. So like I still decided to stay around coaching, and I was searching for coaching roles in the DC area where I was from, and came upon an organization called the Volo City Kids Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization in DC, which runs free programs. And they have a for-profit side, which is their adult sports league. And their adult sports league in Volo City Sports raises money for the Kids Foundation in order to have the free programs in place. And the one nice thing was that I got to connect with others and coach basketball, which I loved in the summers of 2018 and 2019, and still share my passion with others.
All right, my coaching experience is not as extensive, but I've coached soccer, or as you know, they say abroad, football, the beautiful game, soccer for 2 years, and flag American football for 2 years on the youth level. I unfortunately have not done any officiating yet, but in the future, hopefully that would be changing because, I also think it's kind of cool, to officiate there. Next slide. My first coaching opportunity was during the summer of 2014 at what was then called the Rockville Sportsplex soccer camp. It was like a youth soccer camp. Recently, obviously, the Sportsplex at Rockville has been sponsored by a locally renowned heating and air conditioning company, Michael and Son, whatever. All right. Then in the years between that, I didn't really do much in terms of coaching, but then in the next slide after that, as you'll see, I also was with Volo City Kids Foundation. Will actually, inspired me to, join in on it too, because I think, it's kind of nice to have like, them get like a diverse group of kids and like from all over the DC area, and, just to be like having these pickup soccer games for, kids that, they don't have to pay for, but they're just, doing a good way to have recreational activities for kids in DC in the summer. So I coached soccer and flag football during the summer of 2019 there.
And now we're gonna transition.
Also, wait, just one other thing I do want to say. The Volo City Kids Foundation, they're doing this they have similar things all over the country, like in Baltimore, Chicago, New York, and a few other places. So anyone who's interested should look them up sometime.
Yeah, and now we're gonna transition to talk about some famous people with disabilities who have been involved in sports, in playing, and coaching. So the first person who I decided to bring up was Rob Mendez. And Rob Mendez is a person with a disability who was born without any arms or legs. And his current role in sports is being a head high school junior varsity football coach at Prospect High School in the San Diego, Southern California area. And he started his journey as being an assistant high school varsity coach for over 10 years before he had the opportunity to become a head coach. And so what happened with Rob was that since he wasn't able to play football, but while he was in high school, he started moving towards the path of coaching football while he was playing in a high school Madden tournament, and he won it. And the football team at the high school that he was a student at sort of saw his passion for football, so he became a manager. And then they saw about how he was really good with designing plays using his mouth with a pen very quickly, and started working with the quarterbacks, where he spent 12 years as an assistant coach. And and and, and this led to Rob getting an SP, which is the ESPN Sports Award in 2019. And this was the Jimmy V Award that he named, which was named after the famous coach Jimmy Valvano, who died from cancer. And this award goes for somebody who persevered. And they gave it to him because Rob persevered in his experience in order to overcome a lot of obstacles. The next person who I'm talking about is Anthony Ianni. And Anthony Ianni is an adult on the autism spectrum now who had his dream school of being a walk-on for the men's basketball team at Michigan State, where he wasn't on scholarship at all. And he originally started playing basketball at Grand Valley State in Michigan. And he's known to be the first person on the autism spectrum to be a Division I basketball player. And some of the stuff that he encountered at first when he was a teammate of Draymond Green was that he didn't feel very comfortable with identifying with being on the autism spectrum to his teammates, because he felt like they weren't going to treat him well, and be ashamed. And he finally disclosed it to Draymond Green one day when Anthony was in the weight room, and he dropped something, and Draymond was wondering what happened, and he told him that he was on the spectrum. And from that moment, Draymond Green, who's now been in the NBA for a lot of years, and Anthony Ianni have been very close friends. And Anthony Ianni has continued being an activist for anti-bullying, and he's a motivational speaker as well, because part of it was that teachers and people told Anthony Ianni when he was younger that he was going to be stuck in a group home and wouldn't graduate high school at all. And he proved people wrong by trying to incorporate and make change for others. The next person I talk about is Jason J. McElwain from Rochester, New York. And he started to get his fame from being a high school basketball manager at Greece Athena High School in the Rochester area. And his coach, by the name of Jim Johnson, who's a very good colleague of mine, saw how hard he worked and decided to put him in his last game of his senior year, where he ended up scoring about 20 points in 4 minutes and lighting up the crowd. And about Jason McElwain, after he finished playing that game, his story went viral with being on the autism spectrum, and led him to receiving an SP award for the perseverance that he did, and for overcoming obstacles to play. And after that season, he decided to continue staying around the game of basketball at Greece Athena High School under coach Jim Johnson for 12 seasons. And he's no longer coaching there now, but he's a strength and conditioning coach and still works with some of the sports teams at Greece Athena High School, including the soccer team there, as well as he's accomplished and ran multiple Boston marathons where he has set record times for himself. And one of his biggest coaching accomplishments was when he was a high school coach at Greece Athena High School, he had the opportunity to coach Anthony Lamb, who was a Division I America East men's basketball player at the year of Vermont, and went onto the path to play professional basketball. And this shows us that people with disabilities can be coaching athletes that are star players and get the opportunity for inclusion and understand the value to work with them. And here's some action shots of Jason McElwain coaching when he was coaching at Greece Athena High School. And here's him running a Boston Marathon. And here I'm talking next about Doug Blevins, who has cerebral palsy, who has developed a specialty for coaching kickers and punters. And he started coaching football when he was an undergrad at Tennessee. And a lot of well-known kickers who've been in the NFL have been going to him to get improvement on their techniques. And this shows here that even if you haven't played the sport and still have the passion, you can still develop something for athletes and still stay around sports, no matter what, if you have a disability or not. And some tips that I have for you all to sort of get involved in coaching is start creating a network in your own community with people that you know and know that you enjoy being around the sports and have the passion. And once you start getting comfortable, you can start networking out and branching to other people who you don't know, which I have done to coach with, and that's helped me take myself to new heights. At times it is beneficial if you've played the sport, but I can tell you that it's not always important that you've played the sports. I've had a college professor during my time at Salisbury University by Dr. Ron Sayers, who's the top assistant coach for the baseball team that has made it to the regional championships. And he told me when he was a head high school baseball coach that he always looked for the best leaders and teachers in the building to coach with him. And some teachers have told him, I don't know anything about baseball at all. And he told them, you're a good leader. You can learn the stuff.
All right. So not all these famous athletes are coaches, but a lot of them, have just done a bunch of amazing things. So now I'm going to talk about Clay Marzo. Clay Marzo is a professional surfer from Hawaii on the autism spectrum, formerly diagnosed with what the DSM-4 classified as Asperger's. He is noted for having created his unique double-jointed style of turns and spin. Before being diagnosed with Asperger's at age 18 in December 2007, he often received ableism from those around him who thought he wouldn't amount to much due to his conventional behavior. Unconventional behavior. They really weren't there were just a lot of other surfers in the surfing community who were very ableist towards him, but he really rose above them all. In the next slide, we talk about some Paralympians. So Jessica Jane Applegate is a British Paralympic swimmer on the autism spectrum who won gold medals during the 2012 London Games 200-meter freestyle S14 event, setting a Paralympic record. And then in the next slide, let's just discuss for a bit here the problem with separating the Paralympics and the Olympics. One, the Paralympics and Olympics being separated, it's ableist and segregationist. Two, the Paralympics receive much less media attention and attendance than the Olympics make. The athletes at the Paralympics also feel less important. It's just sad, and a really sad fact indeed, because when we hear about the media hype on NBC and whatnot about the Olympics, it's mainly just focused on the Olympics. They're not really covering, there's not really much advertising going into the Paralympics because it's almost like it's not as important as the actual Olympics. Now, there have been Olympians making the, Paralympians making Olympic debuts. So there have been quite a few Paralympians who have actually been in the Olympics and competed. So even some that have won gold. The thing is, though, we really, this really has to change. There should just be more people, a bigger representation of people with disabilities at the actual Olympics. We need to integrate it. There needs to be integration. The IOC needs to stop being ableist and integrate the Paralympics with the Olympics. Since the first Paralympics in 1960, at least 15 Paralympians have participated in the Olympics as well. Now that's only 15 though. There have been so many more Olympians in that, 60-year time frame. What we need more than ever is for more, Paralympians to come over to the Olympics and the eventual integration. I can't stress that enough. By merging the two, the IOC would be doing their part to create a more inclusive world for people with disabilities. Next slide. Well, you got the slides up, right?
Yes.
Or are they frozen or? Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh no. All right. So now these are 3 notable Paralympians who have been participated in 3 Olympic Games. That's right. Only out of the 15 Paralympians who have made it to 1 Olympic game, qualified for 1 regular Olympics, only 3 of those 15 have been in 3. So, and those are Orazio Foggioni, an Italian sledge hockey player with leg amputation. He's been featured in the 1988 Calgary Games, the 1992 Albertville Games, and the 1994 Lillehammer Games, where he won a gold medal at Lillehammer. So those are the 3 that's in the Winter Olympics. And then Natalia Partyka, a Polish table tennis player with congenital amputation of the right hand, 2008 Beijing, 2012 London, and 2016 Rio Games she was featured in. And then we have Ilke Wayuda, a German discus thrower with a leg amputation. She's been featured in the 1992 Barcelona Games, the 96 Atlanta Games, where she won gold, and the 2000 Sydney Games. Notice something in common here, that all these 3 have like a physical disability. They're not, so the sad thing is they're not really promoting many people, who've like intellectual or developmental disabilities into the regular Olympics. So think about that for a minute. Let that sit in. All right, next slide.
So here are some resources for you guys to see in your own time, which talk about Jason McElwain and Anthony Ianni and some of the work that I have done in talking about how sports has impacted my life. I just wanted to provide this all to you as a resource. And now we're going to sort of start to engage in a question session with you guys. And Jake is going to be leading the first and third question, and I'll be doing the second.
So what I would encourage everyone to do for these next 3 questions is input your responses in the chat and we will read them off, or just input your responses in the Q&A and we will read them off. So yeah, chat or Q&A, whatever you want to do. All right, so to start us off, aside from what we mentioned already, how do you think people with disabilities can become more involved in sports? So some of you are saying that maybe schools should include their, do you mind reading that, Will?
Jake, it's you.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry. So Dale Baker says maybe schools should include them more at earlier ages. Then Michael Bergoli said, this isn't a question, just want to say thanks. Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry. All right. Anybody else have any other interesting responses for this, or? No? Okay.
Yeah, I'll be doing the next question. So the next question to put in the chat for your to put the answer in the chat is, in your mind, why is it essential for people with disabilities to be involved in sports on and off the field? Okay, Michael Bergoli says here to the second question, sports is good for body and mind and is a place where people make friends, learn social skills, learn how to win and lose gracefully to become sports.
All right, if there's no further response, we will go on to the third question here. Do you think the we discussed our thoughts on this, but we want to hear your take. So do you think the Paralympics and the Olympics should be combined into one? Why or why not? Well, also we have Sasha Reed saying for the second question, I agree with Michael. There are so many benefits to participating in sports, great for personal health and wellness. I'm just going to repeat the third one just so you guys can remember that. So, do you think the Paralympics and the Olympics should be combined into one? Why or why not? All right. Michael Bergoli says this is really interesting. Integration is a good thing for sure, but I wonder how it would work. Would athletes who do not have disabilities be able to play wheelchair basketball, for example? I think Paralympic movement has really grown and gotten more visible too. It's a great question. Honestly, just not sure. Well, certainly there would be, in an integrated Olympics, we would hope that there would be accommodations made for people with disabilities, but at the same time also, basically it would just be like people, imagine, so like a person who, normally would be playing wheelchair basketball in the Paralympics would still be able to play basketball with his or her wheelchair, but the other people might not. So, still it presents a challenge, but then again, at least this would bring about integration.
Yeah, and adding on that, if you all didn't even realize and know this, what we have known as synchronized and artistic swimming, which is in the Olympic Games, started out as adaptive swimming for people with disabilities. And right now, too, there are some people that are working with the Federation Olympic committees to try to get artistic swimming as a Paralympic sport / synchronized swimming, because it's currently a popular sport in our Olympic Games.
And also, in addition to that, we see more Olympic sports being added every few years, and we see like different, and some of these new Olympic sports that are being added are actually more inclusive than we originally see before.
And Stephen Barsh said yes, how we should combine the Paralympics and the Olympics into one.
Right. The IOC is really needs to get its A game on in terms of preventing ableism. All right. If there aren't any further responses about this, let's open the floor for a Q&A.
And here's our contact information as well.
Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any further questions, or if you're just curious about how you can get involved in a sport more.
Yep, now the Q&A.
Steve Barsh says, well, yes. Oh, no, that was from earlier. All right. Okay.
If you have any questions, you can type them in the Q&A button and we'd be happy to answer them.
Type away. We'd like to hear y'all's input.
Okay. Here we have one question in the chat from Dale Baker. Do either of you ever speak at schools to get students more involved in sports?
Unfortunately, I do not, but I have, just this is our first time actually speaking together about this topic, because what we notice is that there's a problem per se in the disability nonprofit community, and that we don't really see a whole lot of nonprofits really putting an emphasis on recreation and wellness for people with disabilities, and recreational activities for people with disabilities, and how people with disabilities can get involved in more things like sports. So what we're hoping is that this could be a first of many.
Mm-hmm. And Tia put, I think that if everyone is included, they do have some people with and without disabilities playing sports together. So it wouldn't be all players using wheelchairs, just the ones who need the players are very good at the level and even better than don't have a disability. So there's include anybody. I mean, I'll tell you from my experience at the college level, when I was an undergrad at Salisbury University, I was an athletic coaching minor, where they would try to get college students to get involved in the coaching community at the high school and the youth level. And as part of of my class requirement, we had to go observe and coach 30 hours a semester if we took an athletic coaching class in the community and observe practices and apply theory to practice. And during my time at Fort Hays State University in Kansas, I'm part of an intramural club, which is about getting undergraduate and graduate students officiating in the community. Because currently in the state of Kansas, where I am, there is a high shortage of officials and they need students. So the intramural director who runs all the campus recreational activities is a sports assigner for several different sports. And at Fort Hays State University, I'm not the only one with a disability who officiates in the community. There are a couple others that do have disabilities, and the other officials that I do work with that I get assigned with are very inclusive and really appreciate myself as being part of the program. Some questions. One question here is from Milton.
Do you mind if I? Okay, so
Sure.
Says I'm thinking about the assumption for having separate Olympics is because of the assumption that the impact disability creates on competitive disadvantage, at least for some. What are your thoughts on the competition in sports and the competitive advantage and how this impacts inclusion in the Olympics and otherwise? Well, there is that in many aspects of sport, that in some sports, people with disabilities, in many sports, people with disabilities have a competitive disadvantage. And in some sports, there are even sports where people with disabilities have a competitive advantage, like bowling, depending on like if they're using, like if it's a blind person using one of the devices that, pushes the balls forward. But what, we would hope is that we would make it so that once these two are integrated, that any, competitive disadvantage is leveled with like certain knowledge amongst the other players on the team that, they just gotta really slow things down, or they can't really be too aggressive with people, with athletes who have disabilities. I don't know, Will, what's your take on that?
Yeah. So when I was an undergraduate at Salisbury University, took a class on psychosocial aspects of physical education, and one of the big concepts that we talked about was competitive engineering from sports psychologist Jay Coakley. And one of the things that he talks about with competitive engineering is that you can make modifications in games for people based on certain needs. So for example, if you're playing like in a basketball game and you don't have the strength to shoot from the regular free throw line, you can move the free throw line and modify it up based on your disability. So this person with a disability would have an advantage to make the free throw as a person without a disability. And it's definitely just been very important. And I have officiated one game, like one game where I had like one individual with an intellectual and developmental disability in volleyball, and this disheartened me that the one coach wouldn't give the opportunity for this one person with a disability to serve the ball because she would automatically lose a point for the team, and he wanted to play to win.
And it's because of that stigma that a lot of, coaches have this like bias that, it's like, if you're not, okay, how valuable are you to my team and how valuable are you to winning? So, it's like if they instantly assume that based on the disability that you're not going to help them win, then they might only put you in at like uh, for like a few minutes in the middle of the game, or they might do something like say, oh, if it's like a football game, they might say, oh, I'm going to assign you to special teams. That'd be that. We, what I mean, I remember, being, just how little I was put in, little league soccer when I was, and I just remember that we like what my best advice for people, who are, playing sports with disability, people with disabilities who want to play sports, or, who are on teams, you got to be advocates for yourself. You've got to stand up for yourself, or you really have to like show the neurotypical and able-bodied coaches that you are better than that. You can do this. Show them that you have it within you to really be to be that person. You don't have to be like a like full blown like Michael Jordan, David Beckham, but still you should try to like show them that you can really that you're like you don't let the ableist try to tear you apart.
And next here, I'll answer this next one because just of time. I mean, do you coach non disabled? And Ryan, answering your question, yes. A lot of the people that I have mainly coached are people without disabilities. And the one issue that I have definitely faced where I have coached with people who don't have disabilities is that a lot of people don't think at times that I should be coaching them because of my processing at times with being on the autism spectrum, even though I have the passion and the heart. And this has led me to only work at times with coaches who will value my acceptance with a disability. And in the disability world, we have a concept from disability studies called crip time. And crip time is understanding that people with disabilities have different processing and access needs and need to work more around their schedule and not around other people based on their needs to be more inclusive. And this is definitely something important because we have people with disabilities who are playing sports. So we should be allowed to have people with disabilities as coaches coaching non-disabled.
All right. Well, so and also to go off of that, Volo City and also the Rockville Sportsplex camp that I coached at, both of those are for people with just anybody. Those are not specific to people with disabilities. So we definitely, have seen how people, although there are some kids that do have disabilities in those programs, we've definitely seen how the, dynamic there is still very inclusive at both places. Also, fun fact, it's rumored that it's not entirely confirmed, but there are people who, I mean, even he has mentioned it himself, but Lionel Messi, the famous soccer player, is on the spectrum. So let that, kind of serve as like an inspiration to people on the spectrum and really like want to excel at the beautiful game of soccer. All right.
Yeah.
You have any other questions?
Thank you all for your time and coming out and coming to discuss about this to bring sports and inclusion to the forefront. We really enjoyed having you all today.
Thank you, everyone.
And this is Jay, your producer. I want to thank you both for a really interesting and informative discussion. Sparked a lot of interest and a lot of questions. So great job, guys. Uh, it is time for me to shut this session down, and so you can all join the closing plenary session in track one that will start at exactly 4:30. Thank you all for joining us today, and I certainly hope you have enjoyed day 9 of the 2020 TASH Conference Virtual Edition. Take care, everyone.